Hi, this is Dr. Mary Kay Keller, and I want to talk today about teenagers. And there's so many teenagers who commit suicide, and we talk about, what we can do to support teenagers. And having been, I've researched grief to run a support group for parents that has lost children prenatally and or postnatally, and over the years, all of the information that I've read, plus, experiences in my own life and people coming to me, I've often said that Americans really don't know how to grieve. I mean, when somebody dies, you get 2, maybe 3 days off work, which is ridiculous because a person's body, the first 6 weeks, you're pretty much in shock, and then you migrate back and forth through the different stages of grief, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But grief can also be triggered by other losses. No one has to die in order for someone to be triggered to feel grief. The loss of a pet, changes in where you live by moving, that triggers grief. Anytime your normal daily routine is interrupted by something beyond your control, there's a lot of grief. And 30 years ago, they didn't really focus on children in grief, and now they do. And I just kind of sense that we're kind of leaving teens out of that focus. Like they're no longer young enough or little enough to be children, but they're not old enough and their brains haven't developed enough to be considered adults. And they just seems like everything that we come out with, we leave teens pretty much out of it. So a part of me wonders if the depression and the suicide is really all about genetics and mental health issues, and not more about how society fails to support teenagers as they're going through stress. Crushes, for instance. Do you remember your first crush? How heartbroken you were afterwards. Could be something as simple as a friend not speaking to you anymore. I mean, these are the emotional activities that go on in a teen's life that they need the space to be able to process. Just telling them to get over it or suck it up or to tough it out, not a good, healthy response. And I want to post some links after I upload this video into YouTube on empathy and compassion. And I hope that the adults will watch those and think about what that means to the teens in their lives or around them and how they can help them. So first of all, the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was famous for having studied death and dying and bringing up the different stages of grief. So first is denial, which means that something doesn't feel real. You don't feel like you're really in your own skin. You just, kind of an out of it feeling. And then the second stage is anger, and anger can take many forms. You can be mad at yourself, which is probably not the healthiest response because that's just self-aggression, and angry at others, and angry at your higher power, God, whoever it is, your family members, and what I want to say, what I want to go back and say is none of these feelings are abnormal. They're just human being responses to things. Even being mad at yourself. When I say that's aggression, I just, I feel bad for people that get angry at themselves because it's so lacking in self-compassion. And when, if you're a teenager out there that doesn't have an adult in your life that can understand this and help you, I just really want you to be compassionate with yourself, because this is tough stuff. Adults try to make it sound like, they've got it all down and they've got it all figured out. No one has it all figured out. We're constantly learning. Each decade of our life, we learn something new. And so, just be kinder to yourself and try to, find a way to take care of yourself. So then there's, so we've got denial, we've got anger, bargaining. Sometimes that can be in the form of what if, only if, trying to figure out another way that you could have had a different result. Sometimes that involves blaming and shaming, which is pretty awful. However, it is part of the process. And then there's depression. And depression, I never liked that word when it came to grief, because I think there's a difference between chemical depression in the brain and just pure sadness. I mean, the heart just feels sad when we've lost somebody. And research now shows that we both have those cells in both lining it around our heart as well as in our brain. We're in our limbic system. I mean, all of these are just chemical reactions in our brain, in our neural responses, and that's what feelings and emotions really are, kind of like wiring inside of an electrical system. But it tells us we're sad, and that response is perfectly natural. I don't know anyone who loses someone to death or to divorce or to separation who doesn't feel sadness. People may deny it and try to ignore it or stuff it or buy it or whatever that is they do in order not to feel it, but it's always there. That kind of behavior just forms an addiction, because we don't want to deal with our feelings straight up. And quite honestly, being emotionally expressive is not for sissies. It's hard. It's very hard. However, it comes and it goes, and it doesn't mean that life is going to feel that way forever. And then finally, the last one, and I used to have a hard time with this one, they'd say acceptance, and I think, I'm never going to accept it. And what I realized is this: acceptance is not saying that it's okay. It's just a place where you start making plans and doing things a little bit differently than you have been. And it doesn't mean that you have to say that it was ever okay. It just means that you're kind of moving on with your life. So one of my favorite tools to share with people is called HALT, which is, are you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? You can see that on the screen here. The first thing you do is ask yourself when you last eat. And if you're hungry and you haven't eaten in a while, I suggest not going for sweets, because that's short term and it just spikes your blood sugar level, and then you could be back in another place where you're just feeling really low again. So protein is usually a good idea. It takes a little bit, maybe a piece of fruit to go along with the protein to stabilize your blood sugar while you're waiting for the protein to be processed, because it does take a little longer. And get yourself something to eat. So 2 of these are physical. That's hungry and tired. Tired can mean that you need a 5, 15, 20-minute nap, or maybe you haven't had sleep and you need to just sleep for a couple hours. Something else that we don't seem to know about tired is that when the body is trying to heal the brain, and remember, all your emotions and feelings come out of your brain, it wants to sleep. It's like resetting itself, just like you have to turn your computer off sometimes to let it power back up again so that it resets itself. Our brain needs to reset itself. And so, feeling tired is a part of that process. Teenagers also get tired when their body's still growing. There's neurons firing in there. There's cells that are stretching and growing to make you taller and to keep forming. You're not finished until you're 25. So it's normal to feel tired, to want to get up. We're finding now that there's research that's showing that the whole process of teens not wanting to get up in the morning sometimes is about their bodies reacting to the biochemistry, and we need to understand that more when it comes to adolescence. Angry and lonely. Angry, you can pick up a phone, you can call somebody. If you really feel like you don't have anybody in the world that you can call to talk to about your feelings, please do get the 800 numbers. I'll pull those up in just a minute and call there. It's totally confidential. No one is going to tell on you. You can call these 800 numbers and you can talk to somebody. If you're feeling lonely, the same thing for both of these. They're feelings. Realize that it only takes about 20 minutes for a feeling to actually disappear. And you can almost set your watch by that. And you can also journal. You can paint it out. You can draw it out. Find some way to help you get rid of it. For me, I like to bike. Somehow putting that energy into it allows me to expend it and get it out of my system. And then it increases my endorphins, because it's exercise. But when you're really sad, sometimes you just don't feel like exercising. You might need a buddy partner that takes you and says, come on, let's go for a walk, or be with a friend or someone in order to get get that motivated again. Some of the other things that I've seen here, like for instance, I went in and pulled up all these. This is what triggered this when I started looking at this today, because all of these greeting teen sites were about death. And I think that loss and life transition, like I like this one here. I'm going to go in here and take a look at that one, because it's talking about life's transition. So every year in a teen's life from 12 until 18 and and on, there are major changes going on. I mean, I saw it in my own children, but I also see it now in my grandchildren. I fly out west to see them on their birthdays, so I'm out there twice a year. And one of my teens likes to come to me now, so there's only 2 trips out there. But the year in between, even 6 months in between, I'm always amazed at how much change has gone in just one period of time for a teenager. There's just so much happening in the brain, and the personality is changing. I mean, personality is pretty much the same as it was when it was a child, but it gets more colorful, and that's exciting to watch teens become more colorful like that, and to see a wide range of behaviors. There can also be grief because life hasn't been so good for that teenager. If there's addiction in the family, I strongly encourage teens to find an Al-Anon group. A lot of times those can be found in your schools. Sometimes they can be found in your neighborhoods or in the area. You can look that up. I know most of you probably are Google experts by now. And you can look up to find out where there is an Alateen. You can also find Alateen online. Like, for instance, there's chat groups with Alateen. There's also 800 numbers where you can call confidentially. There's another group that I strongly recommend, just because alcoholism and alcohol is so abundantly accepted in our society, and that's Adult Children of Alcoholics. It doesn't matter that you're not a legal adult yet. The impact is still the same for children of alcoholics. And there's a lot of loss sometimes. There's a loss when 2 parents are working and an adolescent feels kind of off on their own or doesn't feel supported. And I'm not saying that all parents do that. I'm just saying that sometimes happens. And there's also a loss in childhood when a child has been expected to take care of other people's children. So when you're kind of forced into a position where you're either babysitting someone else's child or babysitting your siblings, and you feel like you can't make the same choices that other teens have, there's bound to be some resentment there, some anger there. And all of that they're totally healthy, normal feelings. What we do with our feelings really determines how healthy we are and whether or not we can experience those. I was reading through this pamphlet that I found this morning, and talks about things just like relationship conflicts or a relationship that has just ended. If you're experiencing many of these following symptoms that are frightening yourself or maybe your parents, like sleeping difficulties, restlessness, and low self-esteem, these are all things that need to be addressed, but they don't have to be addressed all at one time. If you're failing in school or you just don't care about school anymore, if your relationships with your families and your friends are kind of tanking, if you're taking risk-taking behaviors, if you're getting into fights, if you're experimenting sexually and you're really not into it, but you're just doing it, and denying pain, pretending like you're strong when you're actually not. There's help out there. You don't need to go through this alone. Nobody has to go through this alone, and it makes me very sad even thinking about how isolated teenagers often get, even within their own peer groups. So check for your schools, health departments. There are places where you can go, and quite honestly, there are services that you can sometimes get with or without a parent's permission. So if you need help and someone isn't listening to you, it's survival. The world would not be a better place without you in it. There's something great that you're going to be doing someday. And when I say great, I don't necessarily mean famous. It's great in the sense that it'll be something that you enjoy, something that you realize that you bring your own unique personality to. And, you know, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary situation. And as I said, the world would just not be a better place without you in it. Let me see if I can pull up those. Actually thought I had those already here, those 800 numbers. I'm going to put in, all you have to do, you can do this yourself too. You put in 1-800 for suicide. If you're having suicide ideation, those numbers will pop up here in just a minute, and there you go, 1-800-SUICIDE, which is 784-2433. You can also probably find, let's see if we can find something in one, my computer is being slow this morning, but we'll get through this. See, that's one of those moments, you just get through it. For teens to talk, let's see what that brings up. Hope Caroline, see all of these that come up? There's quite a few on here. There's quite a few resources on here. And so, you know, the only failure in life is when we don't show up, when we don't show up for ourselves. So, if you can't feel like you can't go to someone and talk, show up for yourself. You know, call someone, call one of these 800 numbers and just reach out. But anyway, I wanted to put this out here not only for teens, but for adults as well, so they'd be aware, you know, that we need to really support our teenagers and understand that the changes are as dramatic during the teen years as they were during the newborn stage. You know how you'd look at your newborn and 6 weeks later they look different? Well, it's the same thing that's happening in a teen during those teenage years. Those changes are just taking place so fast. And every year there's a new place in a teen's body and in their mind where things are not the same as they were last year. So with that, I'm just going to sign off. I hope this recording helps someone and that you'll be more open about reaching out to other people, letting them know that you care about them and checking in on them from time to time. And also understanding that as a teen and you're in it, that if you have a friend that's going through it, you don't need to join them in their feelings. You can, however, support them by sharing with them, you know, that they're not alone and that everybody has moments like that, and offering them those numbers as well. So anyway, I hope everybody has had a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend. I did do this the day after Thanksgiving. And that as we go forward, realize, you know, sometimes the holidays are the roughest times as well. So take care so much, and keep coming back and checking up for new videos. This is Dr. Mary Kay Keller and several people's grandmother signing off.